track tier lists have been an integral part of competitive Mario Kart for even longer than Mario Kart 8 has existed. And that says a lot. Everyone has that weird track they love, everyone has that weird track they hate, and especially in the modern age of the Everything app, everyone loves flaming each other over their respective lists. When I made my last tier list video in 2023, I got a lot of comments saying that even if they disagree with my list, they liked how different it was from the standard Nintendo journalist We Rainbow Road at number 1 by default slop they'd seen 20 times over, and how my competitive background gave a unique insight into tracks they'd never thought about that way before. This is mostly true, but I still have my hot takes against the MK Central space at large, so to eliminate my own bias from that line of thinking, I went out and polled the whole competitive community to find out what the game's best players think the game's best track is. So thank you to all 157 players that voted on this survey, and with Mario Kart World now literally 2 weeks away, let's talk one more time about every track in this massive game. You know, I've spoken to some Inward player friends that seem to think the community just loves punching them for no reason, and honestly, seeing this, I can get behind that theory. Like, sure, it's not a good Outward track either, and it is just generally uninspired and boring, but really? Below Baby Park? I seem to have a more favorable opinion on bagging the most. I think it adds a really interesting layer of depth to the meta, but yeah, I'm not shocked by this at all, and even I agree that it being the track's entire personality is a bit overbearing, on top of also just sucking to drive. Like, the world record uses off-road tires, bro. There's our boy! I know damn well all you enjoyers out there are taking a victory lap that you didn't outright lose, but just remember, not even Dry had a long-running genuine ban case in the community. Get this out of my face, I'm here to talk about real tracks.
Trick. 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 Trick.
This might be the only bagging track where you don't want to pull shock. I mean, it won't hurt, but 95% of races on Calamari Desert are won by soft bagging and running up a star, with the very occasional front run on 200cc because it's a minute long there. This level happened before Big Blue, by the way. This is up there with Calamari as far as pulling a star means winning the race is concerned, but Toad Circuit actually does a lot right with having a bit less off-road and an actually difficult ending cut. But then it loses all those points back from Wave 1 syndrome. If you haven't figured out yet that Western players voted on this list, this now tells you loud and clear. I will give it points for how high the skill ceiling is with the endless strats here, but it loses all of them for how quickly redundant it gets playing Long Baby Park in every single lounge event. Doomed to fail from the moment it was announced. 8 Gliders mechanics just don't do this track justice. But also, if motion can't even make the track interesting and is just flat out not used on the longest glider in the game, then maybe it is just the track's fault. I find it funny how this track has just a single rule in the community. It's often the first choice recommendation for new time trialers because its simplicity teaches game mechanics really well. And that's it. Like, comment below, when was the last time you played Mario Circuit in a competitive event? If your answer is 2025, I'd be shocked. The high-level players of this game actually tend to love the city tracks, the degree of difficulty actually being a positive once you're past the initial learning stage. But we're all still in agreement that this one sucks. I do wish Elwer got the chance to keep world record after the rule change, but Messi is nuts for even going and beating the pre-patch time. Respect. Low-key, more coins scattered around DP3 would make it leagues better of a track. Running is already close to viable here if you're fast enough, and that's despite the fact that you go around basically all of them to do so. Imagine then what you could do if you could reliably get to 10 on lap 1 every time. Yeah, it's not quite an oval, but it's as close as you can get, and somehow the one actually involved driving sequence on this track is so bad I'd rather be driving straight. People don't talk enough about how bad this shortcut is, by the way. Honestly, this track isn't too far from being good either. The off-road cuts are just a little too big. The driving is actually fun and a perfect difficulty, extends over the walls a bit, and you actually have a pretty solid and balanced track, but sadly we don't live in that timeline. Honestly, this track isn't too far from being good either. The off-road cuts are just a little... I can't lie, I'm shocked Tokyo is this low. At least among time trialers I've spoken with, this is a beloved track, with 200cc in particular being widely regarded as one of the best categories in the game. Albeit, that is the smaller side of the community, so majority rules as usual. When we're in 2030 telling new MK World players about what 8 Deluxe was like, we're gonna sound absolutely insane to them talking about Cheeseland. It had the longest lasting world record ever, only beaten by one of the most absurd strats in any Mario Kart game, and that's maybe like the 4th most notable thing about what it was like in 8D. To return to that punching inwards for no reason point, I can kinda see it again in this pick. Like, yeah, it's a little bland, but not boring enough to be deserving of number 80. It's even pretty good in TT... Never mind, I get it. I wonder if Yoshi Valley would be any more interesting if every split path was actually balanced. I genuinely don't remember the last time I took anything but the bridge, cave, or cannon. Even if that were the case, though, none of that would fix how gross the end of lap 3 always tends to get. Oh, was I supposed to be saying something? No, that's just my MKS impression. The last 5 seconds are the only part that matters. I had been monitoring the votes as they came in here, and it took a full 2 weeks and 100 responses for someone to finally give this a 10. 70 million copies sold and you have no shooters? Really? This track was doomed to fail from the moment it was chosen to be in the game. Making it 2 laps would have just made it shock reliant, upscaling the current version only would have min-maxed its problems. The only change I can think of to improve it is to have more coins around. Really unfortunate that this track has seen a competitive resurgence because, I can do the smart steering glider. It really doesn't feel like too long since the community actually used to rally around New York. I guess as time has passed, more and more people have lost 10 spots on the final Turn 1 race and realized, wait, this sucks. The more time that passes, the more I wish we just got a graphical overhaul of the DS port. Like, this isn't Sky Garden, this is 2 DP3s in a trench coat, now featuring whatever this is. Nobody talks about one of the funniest things to ever happen in this game's TT scene. Dolphin Shoals had been relevant in the online meta for years as a drafter, so Star went to go TT it presumably for what must have been online practice. He then proceeded to improve the world record by 2 seconds in a week. Actually the most insane, damn, you guys suck moment I think I've seen in any game I've ever followed. Never forget what the balance patch took from us. Thank God Star still got the 1000 day record first. If someone else sniped him because of this, I would have just lost all hope for time trial integrity. Section 3 of LA still makes no sense to me after almost 2 full years of playing the track, and it just sucks in just about all the races played here. But hey, while you're mentally preparing for your impending doom, at least you get to admire Los Angeles' world-famous oil rigs. Yeah. Welcome to maybe the hardest anchored track in the entire game. Most of Berlin is actually kinda good, but literally none of that matters when this is at the very end. With no off-road and a lot of early coins, DRR is supposed to be a strong runner on paper, and yet it's fallen out of the meta. Because if literally the smallest thing goes wrong once in the entire race, it is just over, and it is straight unfair. It's truly wild how much better a bagging trap becomes when the game-breaking shortcut is at the very beginning of the lap. I wonder if this would have even broken the top half if it didn't have ice physics. I feel like I never see teams pick drafters anymore. I more often just see comfort picks that the player thinks they can outline first on. I think this can mostly be attributed to a lot of drafters just not being good tracks, but this is an underrated diamond in the rough that I'd like to see more teams give a try. Recap of the Ice Ice Outpost ending ramps. They're hard for no reason on 150, usually slower in 200, but in time trials, you have to do this or this. 0 for 4 is crazy work. Dry Desert is often pointed to for obvious reasons, but I feel like the even more responsible culprit for the bagging culture this game has is this very box right here. Like I said, I love bagging concept. There's not enough instances in esports where game knowledge is just as valuable as raw skill, but the player base overusing it on tracks like this that really should have just been runners, as well as there being just a tad too many tracks that hard reward the playstyle, it got a little out of hand. It looks right now in pre-release that the nerfs made in MK World are likely overkill because god forbid the casual players don't get their way, so hopefully an update or another game down the line can find a way to make it perfectly balanced. I feel like BDD comes from an era where Nintendo still didn't know how to make a good difficult track, and while the base game does have a couple of flashes, none of them are here. A lot of parts of this track like the split path and the beginningness just do not flow well. Okay, last point on bagging for now. Let me specify that I like bagging as a strat, not bagging tracks. They all just happen to have some major flaws. Riverside is actually pretty solid though. The shroom is in the middle of the lap, not the end, and bonus points for actually being difficult, but once again, it just saves too much time. There are 2 ways in which a track becomes a hard reset online. Either there's a gigantic off-road cut that the entire track revolves around, or in DKS's case, there's a cannon set that makes shock virtually a guarantee. The double being one of the best TS spots in the game only adds to this, but I honestly feel like the track would still play the same way online even if it wasn't there. There was a short phase during Wave 4 where this was Lounge's new favorite runner, but that's so far gone now that some people probably haven't played this track since they thought Link Teddy was going to be the meta. Now it's just, oh yeah, that's in the game. This is yet another track that everyone seems to agree is almost really good. But it's the RWS of 200cc online, so it's already polarizing, or you're a 150 player and don't like the spammy nature of races there, or you're a time trialer and you have to deal with this. This track making the cut again in MK World means pretty soon we'll have been playing Moo Moo Meadows in home console Mario Karts for 20 straight years. I don't know how I feel about that. Another wave, another Berlin byways. Actually a really enjoyable track for the majority of it until you get to maybe the worst ending in the entire game. If only that wall shortcut from DS was in the game, that would unironically save this track. Only 3 years actually in the game, and yet Paris feels like it's been around since 2017. Even the BCP's biggest haters have come around on what genuinely now feels like another base game track, with how overwhelmingly common it's gotten. SSC's recent reinvention of a 200 time trial has somehow been amazing for the category. It feels almost like a 150 category in 200 with the best aspects of both modes, and it feels fully and entirely honest where every fail is your fault. Unfortunately, that can't save how toxic the last turn is online. Amsterdam is weird in the sense that half the track feels like it was made for 200. The gap jump and underwater flow amazingly, but section 3 is, whatever this is. Then that's fine on 150 with the trade-off of the first two sections feeling clunky instead. Is this better than the whole track being good on one mode and bad on the other? I have no idea, but that's exactly what Nintendo managed to create. I cannot believe a track actually went out there and fought Excitebike off its throne and lounge. It might have taken a literal roulette wheel of a lap 3 experience to pull it off, but oh my god, someone went and did it. Very underrated TT category on 150, by the way. I think it's so cool how every single alt path on Sherbet Land has a genuine use case out there somewhere. Staying up, staying down, or diving in the middle at the last leg are all essentially even speed with one another, and even the first hole can be used to outrun the blue on 200. They didn't miss a single... Oh, right, there's a glider. It is unreal to me that a Wave 5 track manages to have the funniest world record history in the entire game across both modes. Like, you have your usual suspects in Alberto, Army, and P. Matt and Shira are cool pulls. Maddie and Michael are... Wait, Jamie? Diogo? Logan? Oh, was I supposed to be saying something? No, that's just my-
This is a bullet bill. This is Yoshi Circuit. Use your bullet bill.
No, literally, this is the entire track. I love Peach Gardens going backwards on lap 3 as a Mario Kart fan. The mission mode callback is a really sweet touch. I just wish it didn't plant this massive shortcut at the very end of the track and ruin its online playability in the process. Funny how 100% of Rainbow Road 8's problems are condensed solely onto this glider panel. Yes, it's another of the aforementioned canon sets, albeit not nearly as baggable as DK Summits, but even just getting the fast glider off of it is pure QM for absolutely no reason, making this time trial pure torture. Alongside Sweet Sweet Canyon, I think Cheep Cheep Beach has also had one of the best transitions into Yoshi strats in the game. I'm an especially big fan of how well this track flows on 200, although it is a brutal hand killer. The revelation of the top path at the beginning of Toad Harbor actually seeing use is one of my favorite record developments in recent memory. If only that double tram bounce that got tested wound up actually working, this would have been one of the best viewing experiences of a record in the game. Since 2018, no other category in the game has held the longest lasting record more than once. Twisted Mansion 200 is about to have held it 3 times. If that doesn't speak to how bad of a category it is that few people want to play it, I don't know what does. The contrast of how beloved this track is online to how much every time trialer despises it remains hilarious to me to this day. I'm still not over the fact that a patch got rolled out just to fix the pause buffering strat here, and Excel bug is still in the game! I said in the last ranking I missed when Singapore was common in the meta, and, well, I got my wish. The plan is simple, just start in the back, have more coins, draft up, profit. It's actually unreal how effective it is, not to mention just being a fun drive as well. The coincidence that somehow almost every single city track in the game has a spammy Section 3 is one of the great unsolved mysteries of this game. Like, they have almost nothing in common and yet all seem to result in this problem. Did the tour devs just not know how to create a good looping track or something? 11 years of competitive Mario Kart 8 and I can only think of one team that ever actually had Thwomp Ruins in their track rotation, and they folded years ago at this point. How is a Mushroom Cup track's only historical relevance a strat discovery? I kinda wish the rest of Shy Guy Falls was as difficult as the Nisk. In its current state, it just feels like 30 seconds of nothing as you prepare for the impossible strat jump scare that it is. Somehow 200 does this perfectly though, despite the mode straight up not existing when the track was made. Super Bell does so much right despite being commonly bagged. The driving is enjoyable and the off-road patches are really well sized, the ending one even being niskable. But you take one look at how many boxes are down in the underground and of course there always ends up being a shock here. There are few tracks in the game with as differing of a community perspective between 150 and 200 as Electrodrome. But I mean, just look at what you have to do at the end of each lap on this track. And if that doesn't look inconsistent enough, look at the alternative. No, Sydney Sprint, just because your stairs are the very first strat of the track does not mean you're forgiven for having them. At least they're not placed like Berlin's, I guess. Also, thank God this Jeswa came up just short on being viable. No, you're not tripping. The lowest rated Wave 6 track in this video is at number 37. And honestly, I think the only reason this one isn't higher is because of, once again, how messy and spammy the very end of the track can feel at times. It's always one of like 3 problems these tracks have, I don't get it. Wario Stadium seems to be the only piece of the Japanese community's influence that the Western world has actually bought into. Our casual players killed the old meta, we found other substitutes for track picks outside of first, but through it all, RWS has been the constant. I still remember that feeling of hitting the ramp trap for the very first time and thinking, wow, I did a Mario Kart thing. I think if I made this poll in 2018, Cloudtop would have been a #1 contender. People still like the track, but more problems have arisen on it as time has passed. The lightning section keeps getting pace locked in both CC's world records, and the blue shell outrun change was just the final nail in the coffin. Daisy Circuit has been the leader of the recent charge of a long-awaited meta shift. Gone are the days of just picking reset tracks after bad 6v6 races where both teams are just as likely to end up with shock. Nowadays, teams opt for tracks that actually benefit their bottom spots, and this is the golden example. Massive shroom cut at the very beginning, and then coins are non-existent for last race's top spots until the second half of the track. And as much as I've been defending bagging in this video, I like this change, because sound strategy is better than a dice roll. The best track in Wave 2, and here it is toe-to-toe with the supposed very bottom of Wave 6. Just a really solid track on paper, you're probably accustomed to seeing this in the top 5 of most other lists. But the length and chaos of the final section make it much more polarizing competitively. At least the set is after the Kanon though, thank you for that. I find it so cool that this track, once in the meta but fell out around 2019, has made a comeback in the form of an old head knowledge check for when they play younger teams. Every time I hear a newer player say they didn't know Bowser's Castle was the actual birthplace of Motion Glider, I feel another hair on my head turn gray. It still doesn't make much sense to me how a track as difficult and inconsistent as PPS 200cc became as widespread of a meta staple runner as it has, but it's been here forever now and remains a massive skill check for players new to the mode. No reason to stop making it if it still works. The biggest reason I can think of for Dragon's Falloff actually isn't the track's fault, rather the game's deteriorating netcode. It just feels like it gets worse and worse with every update the game gets, and when the key section of the track, the NISC, feels unplayable because you get lag bumped in it every single time, that's a problem. Remember when the weight stat actually mattered? I actually ran this poll back when Wave 1 was brand new, intending to make this exact video out of it, but just never found the motivation to finish it. And fun fact, this won! We've had it for 3 years now though, and while its uglier bits have presented themselves, it still really hasn't slipped crazy far, all things considered.
Shroom Ridge. Sure.
For how many new and unique things Athens tries, I'm very impressed a lot of them worked. There are definitely a few parts, namely this glider, that just don't flow very well in the slightest, but there's never a moment where you're not doing something on this track. No wonder there's constant new strats found here. The more time that passes and the higher the community skill ceiling climbs, the more people start to appreciate this track, and I love that. Yes, it has a rich world record history as we all know, but that also goes for the rest of the players that fell in love with Ribbon Road 2 once they practiced it as well. It is just a model for everything right a tech-heavy track should be, with some of the best driving in the game, especially on 150cc. I really hope MK World tries more experimental stuff like the Yoshi's Island Cloud. They almost nailed it on their very first try, but there's just a couple spots where it's straight impossible to reach on 150, turning it into a pace lock as well. If they can fix up those sort of rough edges, I can't wait to see what more they can cook. The track that taught all us old heads how to super bounce before Gorge became just the training ground for them. Finally getting good at this track and being able to keep up with high-level players on it is one of the most satisfying moments of improvement as a rising player in the community. The removal of glider TSing turned this track from good to amazing. It was already a beloved time trial, at least on 150cc, so for the one component that made it a bagger to be removed from the game outright made its online experience just as good. I cannot believe it took 9.5 years for Nintendo to finally create functional stairs. This track deserves its flowers for that alone. I do wish this track got more play, but it is a drafter, so unfortunately it happened to fall out of the meta like all the others. Welcome to the absolute pinnacle of technical achievement in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Big Blue 200cc's top 10 is nothing short of a war zone, topped by a world record time maybe 50 to 75 milliseconds away from its human limit. The Toad's Turnpike level of optimization on a category that's not easy to learn or execute is an absolute spectacle to non-community members. So what's the only other world record tie currently in the game? You guessed it, Sunset Wilds, of course. If this track was just a little better for first, it would be near perfect. The driving on both modes is very satisfying once you're consistent at it, and it's just a shame that you get bumped out on the first turn for starting in first every single race. If you were to build a running track in a lab, you'd create Daisy Cruiser. Extremely short, optimal first position, zero off-road, and no coins to catch up with without hard ruining your line, everything about it is just textbook and almost lines up too well. The best track in Wave 1, but this honestly still feels low for the peak of an entire DLC wave. It does have a really toxic ending, to be fair, even disregarding Motion Glider. Somehow Grumble is one of the few time trials in the game to actually become less toxic as faster strats have been developed. I have no idea how they did it, but anything to never have to do the old Nisk again. If you recall what I said about DK Summit, you might be surprised to see another Cannon Set track placed this high. So what broke the stigma about it? Well, it's tech heavy and driving based enough to the point where you can shake off the inevitable shock if you're fast enough, and that's a much appreciated feature about it. There is a world where length can help a track. Your race is never over on Weibo with it having 2 shocks and 2 blues on average, but the whole track is a boost panel to not punish running too hard. This track also finished in the top 5 of that aforementioned 2022 poll, but the reason this has slipped is unfortunately, once again, the worst netcode. The already laggy final turn is now borderline unplayable online. In the online community, Mount Wario has stood the test of time. Still a common runner and even picked for shrimming up sometimes, but it's sadly fallen off in time trials, with the sub 115 that had been possible for quite some time being delayed months because nobody wanted to endure grinding for it. Nintendo's level of out of touch with the shortcut design in the 8U base game is so funny looking back. Like, we found a smart steering turn skip before any practical use of the intended ramp, bro. Give it up, it's over. Let's see here, immediate 4 coins making it amazing for first? Check. Vital strats to practice so you don't get passed by the entire lobby? Check. Marginal shroom cut to the left of the final turn? Check. I've seen enough, welcome back Wario Stadium. Welcome to the top 10. You know, I've just now realized the trend that all these early shroom spot tracks taking over the meta happened to be in the second half of the BCP. We really just didn't do this sooner because we didn't have the tracks for it, didn't we? Per your vote, Madrid Drive is the best city track in the game. One of the most fun tracks to just sit down and drive, even if Section 3 is a bit linear. Oh, and remember this kid? He grew up to be Declan Rice. Feel old yet? Oh my god. Never mind what I said about Goldmine earlier, this is even more impressive. You'd think being the second longest track in the game would make it pretty polarizing, but no. No buts, it's just plain good. The best track in Wave 5 and the best tour track in the game. A bathroom, man. Who would have thought? If you went back to the announcement of Wave 5 and told people that the bathroom would wound up becoming one of the most beloved tracks in the community, none of them would have believed you, but here we are. It even rivals Ribbon Road in what the standard for a tech-heavy driving track should look like, and this is the best implication of water physics ever by far. I can't believe how good this track is. The best track in Wave 6, I think the player base's initial reaction to BC3 in part caused the kind of retros we're getting in MK World. We said non-faithful remakes are awesome, and they said, okay, let's flip the entire Mario Kart formula on its head. I'm curious to see how they actually stack up compared to the past retros and just the nitros in that game. Debating if I should pull a shortcut and just make you listen to this song for 2 straight minutes. No, but really, this is the common theme at this point in the list. Balanced but runnable, difficult but fun, and just generally good. Has no haters. The best track in Wave 3, and argued for is maybe the best running track in the entire game. You really can't effectively stop to bag at a single set of RR7 from Section 2 onward. That plus it being a section track and a very wide open one at that makes races here generally super calm, which is a very welcome change of pace. I wonder if the just implemented Genswa glider here is going to knock people's perception of the track a bit. I doubt it though. I talked about this in my last tier list video, but if I were to give you a blind resume of a track and said it had a massive early shroom spot, maybe the strongest target shock in the entire game, and a generally spammy type-packed ending, would you guess I was talking about one of the most effective group runners in all of 6v6? Didn't think so, but Hyrule just works, and there's no questioning that. The best track in Wave 4, as well as the entire Booster Course Pass. No surprise here in the slightest, B-Dubs has taken the community by storm since day 1 of Wave 4, and will probably never lose its grip. Another leader of the bottom spot meta shift that I talked about with Daisy Circuit, but jam-packed with tech that could maybe even keep you first if you're good enough at the game. You'd be hard-pressed to find an American team that doesn't have this somewhere in their track rotation, or at least pulls it out once in a while. Wow. I mean, wow. I knew this track was universally liked. It flows incredibly on both modes, which very few tracks can say. It feels balanced and just as winnable from every starting spot, and there's always a new strat to implement to unlock a new level of driving. But I mean, everyone loves Waluigi Stadium, and this wasn't particularly close. Congratulations to the clearly many Wild Woods enjoyers out there, and I'm so sorry you had easily the strongest retro case of every 8 Nitro just to get jumped by Sky High fucking Sunday.